Hello and welcome to season 1, episode 1 of what is sure to be a long-running and popular series, Mind the Gap. My name is C. I'm the CEO of Mind the Gap, and as Oscar Wilde said, you give a girl a ring light and she is bound to start a YouTube channel within 5 to 10 minutes of opening the Amazon box. We always adhere to the wisdom of the great Oscar here on this show, and we'll be referring to him many times, so get used to it. Just a little bit about myself. I am over the age of 40. Hard to tell, thanks ring light. I am married. I'm child-free by choice. And that's all I'm going to tell you about right now, because we'll get a little bit more into my life down the road. But I just kind of wanted to jump right in because I want to establish the kind of viewers that I'm looking for and the people I want to be interacting with. And instead of blabbering about myself, I'm asking a question. And that question is, in this day and age when everything is so divided and politicized and everyone has their opinion, I wanted to ask you, how did you become radicalized? I think that is the most interesting question that I can ask anyone that I run into. I do live in the South. There's another tidbit for you. And I just love to ask other women, especially, how they became radicalized, because growing up in the South, you tend to follow what your parents are doing and vote how they vote, and then there's that moment where everything changes and you kind of see everything with new eyes. So for me, I had a rare experience where I did not become radicalized in college at all. Sad to say, it happened a little bit later for me. So I'll share my story, and then I really want you guys to respond with comments, or you can even email me or make response videos and talk to me about how you are radicalized. So for me, I was working in a really male-dominated industry, and I noticed that the first few years that I was there, as long as I dressed really cute and put on my makeup and did my hair and laughed at all the boys' jokes, everything went great for me. And then when I started to gain a little bit of power and became a little bit more successful, the men's attitudes toward me began to change. And as that increased for me, it got worse and worse. And the men became threatened by me until it, became kind of an all-out battle of the sexes. And I started to experience all the things that you hear about, from the Me Too era, which came later after I experienced all of the absolute worst things that you can go through in the workplace as a woman in a male-dominated workplace. So I kind of started looking into the history of feminism for the first time, which I'm ashamed to say I didn't know a lot about, and kind of learned about internalized misogyny and why some of the other women in the office weren't supporting me. And I began to understand the systemic sexism that had been creating the environment for women that we all know exist today. And of course, all things like pay inequality and all of that, it all fell into place for me. And that is what radicalized me, long story short. And of course I became, a full-on marching in the streets feminist, completely changed my voting habits, and learned to protest effectively and never looked back. And actually, I left that job after 16 years, about 3 months before all of the Me Too stories broke. So I can't imagine what it would have been like to still be there during the Me Too era. I had moved on to a completely different type of career by then. So that's what radicalized me, and we're going to talk a lot about that on Mind the Gap, but I really wanted to get a feel for people who are watching and what radicalized you and how you got started on your journey to whatever it is, you're getting out the vote this week. What you did to protest and make your voice heard, during the last 4 years, or if you had a parent who, had you marching in the streets when you were 2 years old, which is, of course, something that I wish had happened to me growing up, but did not, and we'll talk about that more later too. So just a quick intro to get us started on Mind the Gap. There'll be a lot of things that we'll be talking about on this channel. We'll be talking about feminism, becoming anti-racist, growing up white in the South. We'll be talking about being a woman, working in, male-dominated fields. I also have a background in domestic abuse and sexual assault professionally, as well as doing work in the nonprofit space. I also have an interest in women working in sports. That's something I'm an expert on, and we'll talk about that as well as other things like my deep interest in documentaries, which is my favorite medium to consume. So just to give you a little taste of what we have coming up on Mind the Gap. And one last big thing that we will be addressing is growing up in hyper-religious households and kind of breaking away from that, not necessarily deconstructing or becoming atheist per se, but definitely having to unlearn all of those harmful tenets that we learn when we grow up in extremely religious atmospheres. So those are just some of the themes that we'll be addressing on Mind the Gap, and I hope that you'll follow along with us, and looking forward to having you contribute your own perspectives as well. We'll be joining TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and the rest of the gang too. So subscribe, follow along, tell your friends, and we'll look forward to hanging out with you guys as we move into 2021. Thanks for watching. Mind the Gap.